So just to give you an update, Mike, currently you've got 5 committee members, including yourself. Obviously, once the meeting starts, all the committee members will have to have a camera on to be included in the quorum. But we actually have 5 that are signed on. So you'll need at least 4 more for you to have a quorum.
Yeah, it's 8:59.
Yeah, not looking good for a quorum.
And I'm not sure, I think you got my email, hopefully yesterday, Mike, that Julie had sent.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't see her on just yet, but hopefully when her time comes up on the agenda, she'll be able to join us.
Y'all can see me, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think we're still waiting to see if we reach a quorum. I think we have 7 now, maybe.
Correct. You have 7, including yourself, assuming all 7 can be on camera. You now have 8. I see Jen has joined us.
Thanks. They wouldn't let me do my video for a minute there.
Looks like Mitch has joined us, so including yourself, that does give you a quorum of 9 people, Mike.
Okay. Does everybody have their video on?
I think I see 8, maybe 9. Let's see, who do I not see on video? I think in order to have a quorum, we would need Dr. Baravecchio's video to be on. Hey, Patty, are you on? Can you hear us?
I am here. I was just keep getting kicked off.
Awesome.
Oh,
Okay.
I was about to text you.
So Mike, you do have a quorum now. And also I see Bernard Brown from OCDD has joined us. So I promoted him to panelist in case he needs to fill in with any questions until Julie's able to join us.
Okay, great.
But you do have 9 members present.
You got,
Um,
oh, I'm sorry.
Well, good
Everything's
morning, everybody.
muffled.
I'm sorry.
My sound quality is very muffled.
I like that reef. Is that a cross?
Okay, since we have a quorum, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review the meeting protocols the council has adopted for virtual meetings. And as a reminder, for committee members, you have to be present. You must have the camera on with your name showing. Please have your microphones muted unless called upon by the chairperson. Electronically raise your hand to request to speak and wait to be called on. For attendees, once recognized to speak by the chair, your microphone will be turned on. After speaking, the microphone will be returned to mute. And we're going to rely on staff to help us with that today. Can we go ahead and take a look at the minutes for the July meeting? Has everybody had a chance to review those? And if you have, or if you have any comments or questions about it, once you've had a chance to review them, I'd like for somebody, if possible, make a motion to accept the summary from the July 2020 meeting.
Mike, I'll make the motion to accept the minutes. It's Kim.
Kim makes a motion to accept the minutes. Do we have a second?
I second.
And Michelle seconds. Are there any recommended changes to the summary? Are there any public comments? I'm sorry, we wouldn't have any public comments. Any objections to the approval of the summary? Any abstentions? Motion passes without objection. Next, let's move on to the contractual updates. And we're going to go to staff members. Mary Lee, Brenton, Ebony can present on the contractual updates. Mary Lee, will you start us off by giving us an update on partners?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. The Partners in Policy program has not resumed since the 2020 class was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the July 2020 Self-Determination Community Inclusion Committee meeting, a PIP ad hoc committee was created to make decisions regarding moving forward with partners in policymaking and to bring those recommendations to the full council. And that meeting has been scheduled for October 29th. Are there any comments or questions?
Kim has her hand raised.
Yes, good morning. For the PIP ad hoc committee, I saw that people had volunteered at the last council meeting, but was the new PIP coordinator asked to be on that ad hoc also? I think that would probably be a good idea.
So the PIP coordinator Her name is Adrienne, and she is going to sit in on that committee. So is Jim Sprinkle, who is the executive director of the Families Helping Families that holds that contract.
Marilee, are they members of the committee so that they can vote, or are they just sitting in and observing?
They're not members of the committee.
They're not, okay.
Jill, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a comment? You're on mute. There you go.
My hand was raised.
Yeah, electronically.
Oh, my bad.
I think Jill Eagley and Cindy Haying from the public have.
Oh, I'm sorry, wrong Jill. Jill Eagley, you have the floor.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Jill.
Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Partners in policymaking. So I understand you were saying it got canceled due to COVID in 2020, but when is the state gonna authorize it for it to be implemented next year? The year after, the year after? How y'all gonna, what's that process?
So the council has to decide what to do with partners in policymaking.
Okay.
And the ad hoc committee that was created is meant to make recommendations to the council.
I got you. And
on
Miss
how to
Mary,
answer that question.
yeah, I just got appointed again to do the DD Council. Miss Marilee, as a powerful leader representing the state of Louisiana, being on the DD Council, am I allowed to, if anybody asks me what partners is, can I send them your way? Am I allowed to do anything? Because I did that a few years back when I partners.
Yes, I would encourage that. I think the council in general would encourage that. Word of mouth is a great way to spread information about partners to others who may hopefully apply.
Okay,
Thank you, Jill.
you're welcome.
Cindy Haying. Cindy, you have the floor.
Yes, one of my students was a member of the class of 2020, and I'm just wondering if it would be possible to sit in and understand what's going on going forward so I could help explain that to him. And if there's any way that my program could support partners in policymaking going forward, I'd be very interested in how we might be able to do that.
Thank you. Yes, it's a public meeting, so you can certainly sit in, and that would be welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was all the questions for you, Marilee.
Okay.
So, Ebony, can you give us an update on Lacan and Families Helping Families?
Sure can. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Just want to make sure. Okay. So if you all look, I always come from the status report that's on the website, or it probably was included in your packets. And the Lacan update is located on page 3 of the status report. So just to go over leader positions, currently there is a vacancy in Regions 110 for the Lacan leader. We currently have 2 applicants that have applied and started the interview process. Right now, they're in the process where they are being contacted by current Lacan leaders, and those leaders inform them of the job responsibilities. They answer any questions that the applicant may have, and they kind of just give them a feel of how the position is. And then after that, we schedule a interview with Susan. So right now we have 2 applicants, like I said, and we'll continue to advertise the position until it's filled. But in the meantime, members in Regions 1 and 10 can always reach out to the Families Helping Families in New Orleans for more information about Lacan. Advocacy activities. We follow the federal fiscal year, which ended on September 30th. So since October 1st, there were 8 alerts with 749 actions taken, and there were 2 yellow shirt days with 6 participants. As you all know, due to COVID, the members were not able to go to the Capitol to advocate during session this year. So that's why those numbers are so low. You have a question, Jill?
Okay, so because I always get confused. It says advocacy activities since October 1, 2019, but that is a typo. It's 2020, correct?
Yeah, so, but the information that's included in the status report for this time is the information that is for FY20, or fiscal year 20. So that would have been October 1st, 2019, all the way to September 30th, 2020.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry if that's confusing. Okay, so due to COVID-19, we've been currently hosting the Lacan Leader Calls twice a month, just to make sure that leaders are up to date on current issues or concerns. And we also collaborate with them on how to develop strategies to better support, maintain, and lead their Lacan members. Currently, we're collaborating on ideas on how to get members to share testimonies via video, and conducting legislative visits and their roundtables via Zoom. The Lacan Summer Leader Training was held in August for all of our Lacan leaders. And at this training, we discussed ways to, creative ways to continue Lacan activities virtually and how to keep members active during the pandemic. So throughout the center, leaders hosted their community input meetings for each of the regions, and leaders at that meeting, they discuss outcomes of the 2020 legislative session. They discuss the legislative process, and they ask members to provide input for the council's 2021 legislative advocacy agenda. During those meetings, we received over 60 concerns and issues for the council to consider for the advocacy agenda, and the full list can be found in the executive committee agendas. The executive committee agenda for today at 1 o'clock is located on the website. So if anybody wants to see the full list of issues and concerns that were brought to those meetings, you can go to the agenda and see those. Our legislative kickoff was held in September, and this is an annual meeting with the Lacan leaders and FHF directors. During this meeting, they come up with recommendations for the council to consider for their 2021 legislative advocacy agenda. The leaders and directors rated that list of over 60 concerns that we received from the community input meetings. And they narrowed it down to 3 items to officially recommend to the council for the 2021 legislative agenda. Again, those lists can be found in the executive committee agenda meeting for today at 1 o'clock. If anybody wants to review those, you can go to that agenda, and it's those documents are linked in in that agenda. So you all will be discussing those and actually voting on the actual agenda items on Thursday during the full council meeting. Lacan fall training and legislative visits. The fall training for Lacan leaders will be held on the 12th of November. And this is the training where leaders will focus on preparing for legislative visits, understanding the council's advocacy agenda that you all will vote on Thursday, and discussing what to look for in testimonies. November also marks the beginning of legislative visits. And so information about legislative visit teams will be sent out after the full council meeting on Thursday. So this list has the parent and self-advocate council members in each region, the Lacan leader for the region, and the FHF director for that region. And everybody's contact information is listed on there as well. It also lists your regional delegation and those legislators that are on key committees. We like to have the leaders start with key legislators first whenever they're scheduling their legislative visits. So we list those individuals as well on the legislative team contact information. So just be on the lookout for your legislative team information, and also be on the lookout for more Lacan member meetings. Once you all set your agenda, the Lacan leaders usually start to host meetings with the region just to go over the agenda, help members know how to get involved with sharing their testimonies, attending legislative visits. Right now, they're going to be via Zoom, and information about their roundtables, which will probably be virtual as well. And you can look for those dates somewhere between January and February of 2021. Does anybody have any questions about Lacan?
I have a question.
Okay.
Just for clarity, you said 1 vacancy in region 1 and 10 and 2 applicants?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have your hand raised, Jill?
I do. Okay, never mind. So only one Lacan position is vacant, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That Lacan leader, she covered, or he, they can cover regions 1 and 10.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just 1 vacancy.
All right. Thanks.
I think there is some hands raised in the, do you see them, Mike? Do you want me to call on them, or do you want to do it?
I think you're muted, Mike.
I'm sorry. Ebony, you can go ahead and call on, please.
Okay, so I see that Jill Eagley has her hand raised. Jill, you have the floor.
I'm heavily active in Lacan and Lateach, and my question is,
Oh, you're muted now, Jill. I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
what is the situation about a Lacan leader in Region 1 and 10 that represents Orleans, Jefferson Parish, and I think Plaquemines and St. Bernard?
Yes, so right now we have 2 applicants for your region, Jill.
Okay.
And they are in the process of they're in the interview process. So the first step is that we have a current Lacan leader just reach out to them and thoroughly explain the job and what it entails, and they answer any questions that the applicants may have.
Okay.
And then once they've completed that first step, then we move to the interview process with Susan, who is the FHF Executive Director over Lacan.
So whomever y'all, the DD Council decides to hire and take on for 1 and 10, then they will reach out to me, and any concerns I have, or as a leader, then I can just go to them directly.
Yes, and we will make sure that if someone is once someone is chosen, we send out information about that person and with their contact information. So you'll have their email and you'll have their contact phone number.
Because it seems like past years for Region 1 and 10, when there was a Lacan leader, there was always a change. It was, they had it, and then there was a change, and then they had it, the position, and there was a change. And the DD Council had to arise from above to try to get someone very active or professional that knows that knowledge, with the state of Louisiana and developmental disabilities. That's what I've been encountering ever since I was active in Lacan and Lateach, that I've had somebody and then boom, it changed. And then I'm like, what is really going on?
Well, we're hoping that the next person that we hire will be with us for a long time, Jill.
Thank you, Miss Ebony.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I see Liz has her hand raised. Liz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ebony. I'm just checking to see what are the plans going forward for next year. Have y'all started to think about when the legislature goes back, what the potential is and what may happen? I know it's still kind of far off, but I'm just wondering if there's a plan as far as how to make sure that people are being active and being involved and being able to go to the Capitol. And also to be informed as to what's happening through the alerts and things like that. Have y'all started to make a plan on that? Because I know you said you with the roundtables and with all the others, you're planning to go through Zoom, but any plans on how it's going to look possibly, or getting things in place for the legislature next year?
So yes, Liz, we've been just in constant communication with Randall. Due to the council's suspension of in-person activity still being in place, I guess we're just trying to come up with the leaders ways that they can keep their members active, which was what the summer Lacan leader training was totally focused on. We were just focused on trying to make sure that members know how to do testimonies via video, where leaders can maybe compile them and send emails to legislators like that. We've been just trying to come up with creative ways to make sure that members remain active, just in case the council has to continue to keep the in-person suspension in place. We've been coming up with just ideas on that Lacan call that we have twice a month, and then at the fall training, we'll probably come up with more ideas on how to keep members active. Brenton, do you have any other information that you want to share?
Not really. I was just going to say our executive committee meeting is today at 1, and I believe on their agenda it has a topic related to this. Certainly they can make plans to either keep in-person activity suspended or move it to in-person, but it's also going to kind of depend on what's going on at the time with COVID. I will say certainly if they do resume in-person activities and they want Lacan members and whatnot to come out to the Capitol, we certainly will have to figure out ways that we can ensure those that prefer to stay home are also going to remain engaged, and those that do want to come to the Capitol would come. Feedback that we've received from a majority of our Lacan leaders is they're still very uncomfortable being in in-person situations, especially where there's a crowd. And most of our Lacan leaders have communicated to us, their members have said the same thing. So certainly we do regardless of what decision the council would make, if there are in-person activities or not, we do have to factor in, I guess, the comfort level of people that would be involved. And I think that's one of the reasons why they were kind of moving forward with roundtables via Zoom, because they're all very uncomfortable still being in person. And I mean, as you know, the population we serve, there's a lot of people that are at risk. So we are trying to figure out how we factor in accommodating both sides if the council allows, those that want to do things in person and those that still want to be virtual. But ultimately right now we've kind of been brainstorming ideas, but we don't have a solid plan yet because we're kind of waiting to see what direction the council wants us to go. As staff, we can't make that decision. I don't know if that helps or not.
Thank you, Breton and Ebony. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Welcome, Liz.
And I want to just share another idea that that Brenton and I and the leaders discussed during the summer Lacan leader training. We were thinking that maybe have members watch committee meetings. They can wear their yellow shirts. They can take pictures, and then do a hashtag where we come up with a hashtag and say that yellow shirts are still we're still connected to the legislator, we're still watching, just trying to come up with like really creative ideas to keep the Lacan membership active and interested during the session, because I know everybody's going through a lot, everybody's worried, so we're trying to come up with ways to help the Lacan leaders help their members to stay engaged. So we'll see how that goes. Does anybody else have any questions about Lacan before I move on to FHF? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Karanda put in the chat exactly who from the council will represent us if no one is actually there.
I mean, I think that's what we're coming up with, ideas
Right.
to make sure that that happens. I mean, certainly this past session, activities were suspended, so no one from the council was actually present in the meetings, but we had council members, we had Lacan members, we had our Lacan leaders that were constantly reaching out to their legislators and trying to make sure that voices were heard. I mean, we still sent out action alerts to encourage people to watch committee meetings. And that doesn't mean, and that's part of our education process with our leaders, hoping that they educate their members about the idea that even if you're not at the Capitol for whatever reason, if they're not comfortable, but also I do know there were some members that did attend, even though our council had suspended our in-person activities. That doesn't mean as your own individual, you can't go and discuss the topics and the issues that matter to you. We just will not ask people to go as long as there's a in-person suspension. But I do know there were some members that were able to have meetings with their legislators via Zoom, via phone calls, to be able to still discuss issues that were important to them. So in this time, I mean, we just have to get creative. If we're not allowed to call any members over to the Capitol, how do we do that virtually or electronically rather than in person? But to be clear, that doesn't, even if the council maintains its suspension of activities, it doesn't mean that you cannot make your own decision to go to the Capitol or to meet with your legislator in person. That's completely your own decision.
So Karanda, did that answer your question? Because I see that you have your hand raised. Did you want to make another comment? You have the floor.
Great morning. Yes, I do have a comment. My comfort level isn't high with going in to any of the buildings that I've entered, whether it's the state capitol, it's the Claiborne building, it's a school board meeting, etc. My comfort level hasn't been high. However, I owe it to this community and my child to actually speak up for what we actually need as a collective. And right now with Hurricane Laura and Delta have impacted so many people with disabilities, and we have national attention on the little boy that took the bus, and he's a member of our DD community. I think that some people is gonna have that saying that because of people's comfort level, we're not actually able to go in. That part under this DD Act, we have an obligation to actually promote systems change. And the one thing that a lot of these legislators and representatives know is they know when those yellow shirts are in the building, it actually has a major impact. And even when we did Yellow Shirt Day virtually, that didn't have an impact on them as per if we were there and we actually had some type, if we had a petition signed, because that's a suggestion. We can have a petition signed by everyone in the DD community towards whatever bills are actually being put in place that we're standing for or that we're standing against. But just being quiet or just having private meetings with one senator here, one legislator there, that's not suffice, because that's not going to get a systems change. And I believe in systems change. I believe in our community getting what we're supposed to have, which is due diligence. And right now, that's not happening when it's only one person or a group here or a group there of 3 people that's actually going. No, that's not unified and that's not representative of the council. So if the council wanted my recommendation would be to have a letterhead with a full statement for whatever bill we're actually addressing, what we're standing for, and signatures from everybody in our DD community saying that we're standing for this, that we're supporting it or we're opposing it. That would be a way so that they see that, yes, we may not physically be in the building, but the DD Council, Louisiana's DD Council, is actually taking a stance. And then that's something that you can actually have, on the website for anyone to be able to review. And most of the time they will read it. And we can send one person, one staffer. We have an interim director. Our interim director is getting paid for that. Our interim director can go in the building and actually read that letter, that statement into record. But I cannot sit back and think that the suggestions that we're putting forth is enough, because it's not. And if I'm taking that chance of going in where I can infect my child and my elderly parents, I think that the people that's getting paid to do that should be able to do the same.
So just to clarify a few things. So the positions the council takes, we cannot lobby. So we're not going to push anything out that says we're for or against a bill on a letterhead. We can't do that. You as an individual can certainly tell your legislators how you think they should vote on a bill. But as a council itself, we cannot do that. We can look at issues, which we do during all the regular sessions we have on our website. It's the first, when you go to the homepage, it's the very first scrolling item that basically shows you all the bills that the council has reviewed and looked at and the positions that they take on those issues, not necessarily the bills themselves, but the issues that are within the bill. And so that lets the public know where the council and Lacan stand on those particular bills or issues. Not bills, issues, sorry. And then the alerts that we send out, it's going to depend on the priority that the council has set for that issue. So if we have 3 different priorities. Priorities 1s, 2s, and 3s. 3s, we're usually just neutral on that issue, and we're just watching that bill go through the process and seeing if it involves through any amendments. 2, you usually have bills that staff or maybe a council member gets involved with because there might be some behind the scenes work that's needed just to make sure that education is provided. And our priority 1 bills are the ones that we send alerts on, which, this past session, I don't know if everyone recalls, but whenever alert goes out, assuming the legislature gave us enough time to know some of this information, because there were times where we didn't have enough information for public comment to get in via email. They were reading emails that were sent in if you were for or against a bill that was going up as an individual. So our alerts were intended to go out to let individuals know that you can send your information either to your legislator or to this particular email. And if you sent things via that email, it would be public comment. So we were following what the legislature had in place. So I know that's not necessarily a list of all the signatures of people, but that is also, a way that everyone could get involved. We had very little turnout with our alerts this year. Any alerts that we pushed out, a lot of people, we did not get a whole lot of response to our alerts compared to every other year. In my opinion, I understand that. I mean, there was a pandemic going on. Lots of people were worried about other matters at the time. But also just wanted to clarify that if the council suspends in-person activities, that applies to staff as well. The direction when they suspended in-person activities was that we weren't going out to these things either. So we did not go, and we also have to follow the directive, or I have to follow the directive of my superiors or whoever my supervisor is at the time. And so that all of that is discussed between the council and their employee. And when in-person activities were suspended, that suspended staff from going and conducting in-person activities as well. Will that happen this year? I don't know, but I do encourage you, if you want to voice your concerns about that matter, to check in on our executive committee later today, because they will be discussing that.
Thank you, Brenton. Ebony, can you go ahead and give us update on Families Helping Families?
Yes. In the agenda, well, if you want to check the update on the status report, it's located on page 7. But in the agenda, we linked the year-end report or the summary for FHF. At the end of each fiscal year, we complete desk audits and site visits on all the centers. But due to COVID-19, this year, we're only doing desk audits for every center. The centers that were scheduled to have on-site monitoring visits were Bayou Land, Families Helping of Northeast Louisiana, and Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana. Those will be scheduled at a later date. So we will be doing desk audits only for this year. In the summary or the year-end report, there's information about the centers that did not meet their deliverables. A lot of the information that the directors provided to me, why they didn't meet their deliverables was due to COVID. The pandemic put restrictions, the stay-at-home order, a lot of that put restrictions on where the centers could go. And one of the centers did not have the capability of having virtual webinars, but they do now. So a lot of the centers are on target already. As you can see from the first quarter performance data, they're trying to make sure that they meet all of their deliverables for this fiscal year. So if you want any information or specifics on each center in that year-end report, you can look at the information that each director provided as to why they did not meet the certain deliverables. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. But the information that Brenton is sharing right now is for the first quarter performance data for FY21. The one that you all received in the agenda did not have all of Southwest Louisiana's information due to Hurricanes Laura and Delta. They were impacted. So that director didn't get me the information until yesterday. And then I was able to update this chart for you all today. Does anybody have any questions on FHF?
I see one hand raised. Jill Eagle.
Wait. Who?
It was Jill Eagle. Do you have anything, Jill Hanno?
Oh, do we currently have your updated the updated data that includes Southwest FHF?
No, that was the one that Brenton was just sharing on the screen. We'll update the one that is on the agenda, Jill, but the one that's currently linked, no, it's not updated because I received the information yesterday.
Okay.
Okay.
Jill Eagle, I see your hand is raised electronically. Do you have a question or a comment? If so, you're muted.
Okay, so next year's legislative session with the state in 2021, due to the COVID and all the funding that the government's lost, what is next year's session going to be like, and how is it going to be implemented with revenue funding for all the disability agencies that the council represents, just in general? How is that going to play out between 2021 and 2025? I'm just curious because I'm a little concerned with everything and with everything that's just been happening.
Do you want to take that one? I mean,
hey, Jill. So, I mean, unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what session's going to be like coming up. Obviously, that's many months away, and depending on how the session, how the legislature decides to conduct session is really going to be dependent on where we're at as far as COVID goes in April, I believe, when it starts. I do know in this, so two things. One, later in the agenda, we have special session updates. I've asked Jen Katzman, who's with Medicaid, and Julie Hagan, if she's able to join us. If not, maybe Bernard, who's here in her place, might be able to fill us in. If they have any updates for special session on any impacts that it may have on those departments. But I do know, as far as going into the upcoming session in 2021, I mean, there have been legislators that have alluded to the fact that there may be cuts, but I think right now we just don't know. I think after the first of the year, you may have a better idea when the governor starts to release his budget, what that may look like. But right now, I don't think we can accurately tell you what to expect in the upcoming session and how that's going to impact services. There's a lot that could change between now and then.
I appreciate that, Mr. Britton, because let me tell you, it's been rough and rough and rough. And I know I represent the DD Council. I used to serve my time with the State Independent Living Council. I'm on the board for the Arca Grid in New Orleans. I went through Partners, Special Olympics Board, and I just hope that moving forward in the state, that there is going to be a DD Council and the Office of Citizens with Developmental Disabilities, including the Louisiana Department of Health, because I know that the government lost a lot of funding, but I hope that those agencies, it's going to be implemented and the funding will be the way it should be, not going backward or anything like that.
And also keep in mind the session that comes up in 2021. So the session that's happening now that ends next week, I believe, it is dealing with the budget now.
Wow.
When we have session in the spring, that's going to be dealing with next year's budget, which is going to start July 1 of 2021.
Who decided to have a COVID extraordinary special session? Who was the one that implemented that?
It's my understanding the legislature called themselves in a special session.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Welcome.
We have any other questions for Ebony? All right. Thank you, Ebony. Next on the agenda, we have a request from Council Member Lillian DeJean regarding some self-advocate representation in Partners in Policymaking and Lacan. So at this time, I would like to give Lillian the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mike. Hello, everyone. So at the last council meeting, our public input survey, I think if I'm remembering correctly, only like our respondents, people with disabilities only composed 8% of that, or about 8%. And to me, that number was pretty striking. So I decided to do some further digging. And so I requested from our staff some numbers regarding our self-advocate participation in Lacan and partners in policymaking. And so for this, I'd like to share my screen. Miss Haley, I see that you're the host. Could you make me the co-host temporarily so I could share my document? Would that be possible? I think, oh, thanks. Give me 2 seconds as I share. Can I think I got it. Thank y'all for your patience. Can everyone see this document?
It's really
See the folder that it's in.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, you may have to go back into the shared screen and highlight the actual document once it's opened.
Wait, I think I found it.
There you go.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank y'all for your patience again. So these are the numbers that I received from our staff, and they're pretty striking numbers. And so if we can briefly go through them real quick. So in regards to Lacan, we have a total of 8 Lacan leaders across the state. 100% of our Lacan leaders are parent advocates. One also identifies as a self-advocate. And for our members, we have 6,160 contacts or members. It's important to note that only 169 of these members are labeled as an individual with a disability, while we have 1,023 members labeled as a parent or family member. So I did the calculations, and that means that people with disabilities only make up 2.47% of our total Lacan members, which is insane. So looking at partners in policymaking, I asked for numbers from the last 3 years. So to specify 2018, 2019, and 2020. For these participants, the data is based on those graduated for 2018, and 2020 is based on those accepted since the class never had a chance to finish. So over the past 3 years, we've had a total of 61 participants. Only 10 of those participants were self-advocates, while we had 51 participants who were parents. So that means that only 16.39% of our PIP participants from the past 3 years were individuals with a disability. And lastly, I asked for numbers on our presenters, because if we're kind of teaching policy specific to disability and kind of exploring the disability world a little bit more. And so it was really striking to me when I learned that only 4 of those presenters were self-advocates. And I think it's super important that we, collaborate and have perspectives from parents and professionals, but I also think we also need to learn about disability from people with disabilities as well. So I think it's safe to say that if self-advocates only make up about 2% of our Lacan membership, our policy endeavors may not be completely reflective of what self-advocates really want and need. We really, as a council moving forward, need to make a more concerted effort to solicit input from a more well-rounded group of stakeholders, because it's apparent from these numbers that we're not doing that. It's really vital that we make room at the table for everyone. And I think we also have a responsibility as a council to model trust, inclusion, and respect, because these are the foundations for community. And we're not going to get self-advocates, and especially our youth, involved without community. People with disabilities, we already know, tend to be more isolated than their able-bodied peers. We're not looking for another dysfunctional system to be a part of. We're looking for community. So moving forward, I guess the question now is, what do we do about this? Because we can't just let these numbers stay the way they are, because they are not good numbers. They're uncomfortable numbers. So we really need to make our Lacan leaders aware of these numbers, and that the council wants to prioritize soliciting more self-advocate participation. Our Pip coordinator needs to be made aware of these numbers. So she can also help make a more concerted effort to include self-advocates. Everyone needs to be aware of these numbers, because again, they are not good numbers. Another thing we can do to solicit self-advocates is increase our opportunities to learn about disability history and disability culture. A lot of people don't know that the disability community has an incredibly rich history. It's not taught in schools. I didn't know we had a history until Crip Camp came out on Netflix a couple months ago. And I've been involved with Lacan since I was 13 years old, and I am 18 years old now. And for 5 years, I did not have my own history. Actually, for about 18 years, I did not have my own history. But here's the thing, we already have these opportunities available. We just need to utilize them correctly. For instance, we had Disability Rights Day a couple months ago, right? And it felt like Testimony Day, which was kind of weird because generally we utilize testimony whenever we're fighting for services, right? But we weren't really fighting for anything that day. And I support testimony, and I think it's one of the most important advocacy tools that we have. But testimony is really celebration. It's mostly fighting. And I think our disability community is something worth celebrating. Disability Rights Day is meant to celebrate the rights that we have. I mean, we could have talked about our history, the Section 504 sit-in, the Invalid Corps, the passage of the ADA. I mean, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of that now. We really have an opportunity to make being a part of this community something positive, and it is. So I don't understand why we're not reflecting that in our actions as a council, right? We have the opportunity to say, hey, this is where we're at, this is where we came from, and this is where we want to go. And I'm proud to be a part of this community. So to sum it up, we have numbers here. They're not good numbers, but we have an opportunity right now to figure out how to not have these numbers be our numbers. We can model trust, inclusion, respect, and culture. So now I want to hear from you guys, because I've talked for a long time, and collaboration is where that magic happens.
Would like to say something.
Go ahead, Stephen.
So I feel like this conversation needs to be held at our DD Council meeting, our main one. So if we need a motion to do that, I would be willing to do that. But I agree with you, Lillian, 100%. We can do better and we need to do better. So let's make it happen.
If there is a motion, if we are entertaining this motion, I'll second it, because this is a very important important issue, and it's just not talked about enough. And it's sad because we are on this council because it's a community. We are not talking about this enough outside of this community, but now this is evidence that we may even need to talk more about this issue inside of our community. And I think this is the first step to bringing this up, and I agree that this needs to be talked about with the full council on Thursday. And I'd like to thank Lillian for bringing this issue up to our attention. And I agree, like, the numbers are just staggering, which is an appropriate word.
All right. High five, Jill.
Lillian, thank you. You always bring enlightenment and enthusiasm.
Always enthusiasm.
Right.
Can we keep that page up so I can write some stuff down real quick?
Yeah.
Are we done?
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Cool. My bad.
Thank you.
So Stephen, I understand you want to bring forth a motion. Can you flesh that out for us a little bit? From what I gather, you want to have.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that this discussion happens at the next DD council meeting scheduled for Thursday. That this be put on the agenda and Lillian be given time to go over this and enlighten us with this again.
Okay.
Is that you with background?
Yeah, there's some kind of feedback or static going on.
So as some clarity, I mean, since I don't remember the exact rules, but I believe since the agenda is set for Saturday, you would have to have, not for Saturday, for Thursday, I'm sorry. When this motion comes up, I think you'd have to have a vote by the council to actually add it to the agenda. So just throwing that out there. But also, Lillian, if you're willing to share this information, if you send it to me, I can send it out to the committee. And then also, just as my 2 cents, as far as the Lacan member makeup, I'm not saying it's not 2.47%, but I'm saying don't assume that if they're listed as other unlabeled, they are not a self-advocate. Just that information is not required to join as Lacan. So if they opted not to share that information, our Lacan leaders do list them as other, or they leave it blank. So I do think representation is a little higher. I'm not saying it's 100%. So I totally agree with Lillian that it needs to get better and welcome any ideas y'all have to make it better. But I do caution you about that particular number because the data is just not there to give you an accurate depiction.
Yeah, and I agree that it probably is higher. But I think we can take this as a learning lesson of maybe we have we don't kind of have that unlabeled option, so we can have concrete data on our representation. Because we do know that overall our self-advocate representation is generally lower than, you know, our parent advocates. And so I think that it just makes it extra important to really know.
Thank you, Lillian. So if getting this on the council agenda would create difficulty, then maybe we can just work it into the conversation at the meeting.
That is what one of, there are 5 public comments, but that one did catch my eye, and that to say work this into the committee presentation Thursday, which I think is a great idea.
Yes. And if we're going to do that, Stephen, would you mind just withdrawing your motion?
I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. And Lillian, we're going to try to make time for you to distribute this information to everyone on Thursday.
I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Is there any comments or questions for Lillian? I've lost that part of my screen right now and I can't see it.
There are a few comments in the chat. Cindy Haynes said, at BPCC, we have been reaching out to students and encouraging participation. I would be happy to support by offering a learning platform that is able to reach through the state. Kathy Dwyer said, perhaps start early in high school during the transition process to inform students about the DD Council, Lacan, and partners in policymaking. Cindy Haynes, she left her email. We do provide the information to students accessing pre-employment transition services through BPCC. And Karanda said, Miss Lillian, I agree with you 100%. The DD Act requires that. I highly recommend Louisiana Workforce Commission be brought to the table to aid. LWC receives federal funding to promote and aid in self-advocacy in the IEP process and beyond. Bambi said it can be part of this committee's report at the council meeting. Michelle said, I concur with Bambi. Lillian can discuss during the committee report. And Christy Curtis said, great work, Lillian.
Okay, thank you all. Anyone else? Okay, I guess that will bring us to the next part of our agenda, the non-contractual updates and activities. Do we have Jen on? Is she available? Jen Katzman?
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I had to unmute in both places. Apologies.
Okay, you have the floor, Jennifer.
All right. So just making sure I'm on the right part of the agenda. Is this the special session update?
Actually, we're at the Act 421 Children's Medicaid option.
Sorry, it's small. It's kind of hard for me to see. Okay, one above that. The apologies. The pop-up keeps blocking it, so I couldn't see which one we were on the agenda. The chat pop-up keeps blocking it, so I couldn't see where we were on the agenda. Thank you. Okay, Act 421 Children's Medicaid option. Quick update there is that we are actually having our next stakeholder meeting, I believe this afternoon, and we're going to be continuing our discussion on nursing facility level of care, which is a pathway into the eligibility option. And so we're basically all that to say that we're continuing our stakeholder meetings. They happen about every 2 weeks to a month, depending on the topics that we need to talk about and how far along we are in our implementation readiness. We did submit the application back on September 1st. I believe I had provided that update previously on our timeline, but that was completed. So CMS, our federal partner, does have the application and is reviewing it. They did send us notice that they have done their initial assessment of completeness and consider the application to meet federal requirements for completeness, but now they are doing the programmatic review to determine if they will approve us to move forward. It's in the federal public notice period, and I think that that actually will end very shortly, or it might have ended last week, apologies. It lasts 30 days, and I believe they posted it on September 13th. So I think the federal public notice period ended October 13th. Being in session, I lose track of days, so I apologize. So right now they're in the process of doing that review that I was explaining about on the programmatic side to determine if it meets the cost, the budget neutrality standards and the demonstration standards to move forward with the waiver. And what we'll do is have several meetings with CMS over the next few months, and they will talk to us about their questions, and we'll respond to those. We did request a January 1st implementation date, but I just want to be fully transparent. As we get further and further along this year, I'm not expecting that we'll get approval by January anymore, and I think it's just taking them a while to review what we submitted. We haven't gotten our first set of questions yet, and it's already almost November, so that makes me a little, cautious about that start date. Makes me think that it's going to actually start after January, given that CMS does not have a strict timeline that they have to follow. And other disaster priorities are taking their attention away from reviewing regular 1115 demonstration projects. Since disasters and emergencies can have their own 1115 demonstrations, I think that they're mostly focused on those right now. So as far as the program itself, just a quick reminder on what we did request, which is that we have 3 pathways to access Medicaid under this option, and that's for persons who, children under the age of 19 who have a disability and are, who meet one of 3 levels of care. They have to either meet the ICF level of care, nursing facility level of care, or hospital level of care in order to be eligible. Their parental income is disregarded for the purpose of this option. So their eligibility is just taken in the context of the child. And it gives them access to all the Medicaid benefits and services. So just the regular, what we call state plan services. It does not access our usual home and community-based waiver services, where I think a lot of our community is more familiar with those. Those are extra services afforded through those home and community-based waivers that are not afforded under our regular Medicaid full benefit coverage. So that is not a part of this program, and I just want to be clear on that. So what we'll do is continue to keep the council updated as we hear from CMS, and continue to have our stakeholder meetings on particular implementation topics as promised. We are asking, really asking for help on identification of more families to be involved in that stakeholder work group. We have a really good invested stakeholder work group, but we find that we have some shortages of invested families and members who may actually want to benefit and access these services, and it's hard to identify them, even though we've sent out the invitation. So if y'all know of anyone who has talked about this program or is interested in this program for their children in particular, then we would love to have their involvement and really looking for that more member engagement perspective. And also, it was, you know, we're also looking to have a more diverse group. And so please, you know, if we can reach out to a more diverse audience, that would also be really important to us. So please spread the word that we're looking to get more involvement in our stakeholder work group.
Hey, Jen, if people want to be involved, how would they get involved? Who can they reach out to, or?
Sure. So they can email that email address that was in our presentation. I think it's 421-CMO@la.gov. Hold on, I'll tell you right now what that email address is. It is, yes, 421-CMO@la.gov. And they can request to be in the stakeholder group, and we'll include them on our invitation. And then, like, if you,
I added that email in the chat. If you look in the chat, the email will be there.
Thanks, Brenton. And also, just if you are in you know, in your advocacy lives, if you're in any social media groups who may be interested in this, you know, I would be so happy if you wouldn't mind posting there about our stakeholder group. You know, we are looking for a bit of a broader audience who is really interested in these services to give us their take on how it will best help families. And so, please. And I think, any questions though on that update?
Hey, Jennifer, this is Mike Billings. I received an email from one of the council members who's not able to be here today, and maybe you can speak to this specifically, but they were asking, is there any way to get numbers to the committee on the number of slots and the number of slots filled and the dollars associated to the program and dollars used by fiscal year we go forward with this?
You mean after we implement? Because that information was in the stakeholder presentation. So it's,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Will that just continue to be updated as we go along?
Yeah, definitely we can do that. It is a great question because the demonstration is subject to appropriation, and so we do kind of have to adjust our service offerings based on what we can afford. And that doesn't mean we'll cut anyone off of services, but I mean, what we can offer out the gate is we're going to roll it out in, you know, a little bit of a staggered approach to see that we're not over expending in that first enrollment. So what we'll do is as we fill slots, we'll put that on our website. We do have a website dedicated to this program. It's ldh.la.gov/Act 421, if I remember right. And so we'll make sure that it gets put up there with updates on our appropriation and how many service offerings we're able to afford with that.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions or comments on Act 421 for Jennifer?
And Nicole, I took down your name, so I'll reach out to you privately for your contact information.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you for that update. Next on the agenda, we have two additional issues that we've asked Julie and Jen to educate us on. I know it was questionable whether Julie was going to be able to step out and join us due to special session, but we do have Jennifer here. So as there's been a special session for the past few weeks, and we want to allow time to hear for any updates that impacts this session may have on services for people with developmental disabilities. And we wanted to continue our discussion from the last meeting regarding the ending of the Appendix K exemptions in January. So Jennifer and Julie, if you're here, you two have the floor.
Sure, and Julie is on. Julie, if it's okay, I'll lead it off. And I know there's several things on your plate too that you've been tracking.
Yeah.
So special session is still fully underway. It started at the beginning of October, and it goes through October 27th. So we're entering our last week. It is moving extraordinarily fast. New bills are proposed every single day. And a few of the ones that we are tracking in particular that may be of interest to you are around the Supplemental Appropriations Bill, which is HB 39. It did pass last week, so it is final, enacted and enrolled. And it is basically allotting 2 additional appropriations to home and community-based service providers. One is $6.2 million for retainer payments to adult day centers. And what that means is because adult day centers had to close due to the COVID public health emergency, retainer payments are an option that CMS allows for those closures, basically to retain those services even when they have to close. And by retain services, I mean they can continue to pay for their overhead and staffing costs so that when they reopen, it's seamless and they don't have to permanently close their doors. So that's what a retainer payment is for. So there are 2 additional retainer payments underway as a result of that appropriation. We have already made 1 retainer payment from the Department of Health, and so this will allow us to make 2 more. They will be paid out within the next few weeks. We're already in discussions with the providers, and they are submitting the documentation that we need as per federal requirements, and so that is underway. The other appropriation in that legislation that is for home and community-based services is $30 million for a temporary rate reimbursement due to COVID, essentially. The way we worded that was initially the way it was phrased by the legislature was for COVID-related expenses. So we worked with the legislature to get the language to talk about a temporary reimbursement increase so that we could effectuate that a little faster on our side, because if you tie it to COVID specifically with certain payment mechanisms, it's all federal requirements, but basically it would have required us to go back to CMS to get that additional approval. And we thought that if we tweaked the language a little bit, we could do it within our existing authority without having to go back to CMS. So that's why you may see it in the posture that it is today. That was so that basically we could make those payments faster without having to go back to CMS for approval again. So that's the Supplemental Appropriations Bill. There's also some legislation underway by Representative Butler. I believe it's HCR 29. And it is about ICF leave of absence days. We've been working with the representative to exclude a federally declared public health emergency from the count of leave of absence days for ICFs. And so for those who maybe are not familiar with this, there is a restriction on the amount of days that Medicaid will pay for a leave of absence from an ICF. It's 30 consecutive days or 45 non-consecutive days throughout the year, and that count starts over every year. And we will pay 75% of the ICF cost for a resident to leave the ICF for up to 30 consecutive days or 45 non-consecutive days. And so what was happening is that this COVID public health emergency is lasting so much longer than everyone thought. It truly is novel and new, and no one could have predicted what would happen. But that means that people are away from the ICF much longer than they ever anticipated. And so they don't want those COVID public health emergency absence days to count against their overall total of days that Medicaid will pay for their absence. And so Representative Butler is running legislation to exclude those public health emergency days, and the department is working collaboratively on that and already preparing our rule and state plan amendment to effectuate that exclusion. So those are two things that come top of mind on the home and community-based services front. And then I know that you had a question about Appendix Ks. I did want to let you know that the public health emergency for COVID was extended in October, which means that a public health emergency by the federal government will last up to 90 days. And so for the 90-day period, it would end on January 21st now, and that's the new potential end date for the public health emergency that we'll be watching very closely to see if they extend it again. But as of right now, the 90 days is January 21st. And so what that means for us is that a lot of our flexibilities that we've put in place with CMS on our 1135 waivers, our Appendix Ks, we're watching that determination to be sure when things might end. And so specifically in regards to the Appendix K, we had gotten approval from CMS to allow those authorities to last through January 27th. So it's not tied to that January 21st date. So I wanted to clarify that so that no one got confused. The Appendix K flexibilities will last through January 27th, as was always planned. And we are working with CMS right now on how we can extend that out further, given that the COVID public health emergency is lasting so much longer than anyone anticipated. So even though right now our Appendix K authorities in January 27th, there is a good chance that we may be able to extend that out. We're working with CMS to get that guidance on how we can do that and how it might look going forward. So we'll just keep y'all informed on the progress that's being made on that front and what CMS guidance comes down on what we can do relative to those Appendix K flexibilities. And in relation to all the other flexibilities that are in our state plan and 1135s, those are tied to the public health emergency end date of January 21st. So we'll be watching that closely to see if it gets extended. I think I covered the authorities, but Julie, I wanted to turn it over to you if there was anything else on the special session front. I'm sure there is that I missed.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I needed to do the Alt-A thing or just the unmute. I actually have a little more on the Appendix K discussion, but also just a couple of things. So on the special session updates, there were just two other bills for people's awareness. There's House Bill 95, that's also by Representative Butler. And what that bill is trying to do is to, there's discussion about visitation in the intermediate care facilities or in our community homes, and some allowances there for families who have gotten tested. And we're working with Representative Butler. That one is not approved yet, and it's still in the process and still having some amendments. But it does relate to visitation specifically in our community homes. And then Senate Bill 53, that was actually what I was just watching as I was listening here too, just went through. And what Senate Bill 53 will do is for our adult day care providers, which is typically our day program providers, and the adult day healthcare providers, it has to do with onboarding. And if they in fact had to lay staff off due to COVID, to allow them to come back on, rehire them without having to go through the same background checks. It does leave some things in there like drug screens and whatnot, because there were some concerns about not having any requirements. So that one is making its way through the process as well. So those were the only other two, just for folks' awareness, in addition to those that that Jen was talking to you about. In terms of the Appendix K exemptions ending, we did have the stakeholder meeting, and advocate and stakeholder meeting last week. We did record that. We tried to blast it out to get to everybody, but it is recorded and on our OCDD website, and we are still taking questions about that. And to Jen's point about the ending on January 27th, during that meeting, what we asked, we typically have plannings that occur on a quarterly basis. And so we have been asked, we are asking that those people that are using the exception spend October, November, December planning, just in case those exemptions go away in January. So like Jen said, we're closely watching it, and there's a chance that it will be extended, but there's also a chance that it won't be. And so we don't want to wait until December to really do the planning process. So part of the discussion and what we had with the advocates was to help them understand that we need to spend this last quarter in our interdisciplinary team meetings for those folks that are using exceptions to really start to think about planning and think about what needs to happen, and to start thinking about any plan of care revisions. So, you know, there are some, I have heard some feedback from folks saying, well, why can't we just do the extension? And we just, at whatever the deadline CMS gives us, that is when those need to end. The biggest concern that I've gotten from people is related to the family members being able to continue to be paid caregivers. And in that meeting, we talk a lot about what monitored in-home caregiving is, which does allow family members to be paid caregivers through that program. And there is kind of a per diem payment instead of an IFS or an hourly payment. And we do believe that is the best option, because it's very difficult when it's a family member who's being a paid caregiver to think about when are they being the paid caregiver and when are they being the family member. And those lines can sometimes get blurred, especially if you're having to kind of clock in and clock out. And so some people have asked that we consider family members continuing to be paid caregivers even after the public health emergency, and have stated that, have quoted some other states that do allow that. We have been, for several years, this has come up in the council a few times over the last couple of years, asking us to look into this. And there are some states who do allow it. There are some differences though. So a lot of the states that allow it don't have 24-hour one-on-one paid supports in their waiver programs. And so, and they do have more of a per diem, similar to what we talk about with monitored in-home caregiving for folks who do live with family and want to have, you know, that option or other options of people that they know, you know, coming into their homes and working with them. But we do know that, you know, a lot of folks have said that's important to them. We are continuing to explore that and continuing to explore what may make sense for us to do in our waiver. But I will share with folks that we would not be able to do it on an emergency basis. So what that would require is for us to go in and do an amendment to our current waiver through our regular process, which typically kind of from when we decide that we need to start engaging stakeholders to figure out what it needs to look like to get it to implementation is typically anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And so it's not a short process, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's not a short process. So we will continue to consider it. And as Jen said, we're also closely watching, and if CMS does give us an extension on the Appendix K, then we will regroup and relook at, you know, what we would be able to then continue to do. I've also heard from some of the provider groups some concerns as well related to some of those exemptions. And so as we continue to receive that feedback, we'll continue to take a look at options. But again, just want to make folks aware that we are really strongly encouraging folks to have those discussions, because if it doesn't end in January, it's going to end sometime, in the future. And so we need to just really start thinking about planning and what things may need to change in a person's plan of care long term. The other thing we have going on is in the last Appendix K that we submitted, we had gotten a lot of feedback from folks asking about, indicating some need for, if not day program, something to do during the day. And we had a provider group in New Orleans who had been doing what they called a virtual day habilitation program. And it was Zoom, similar to what we're looking at each other right now. And they did some of the similar activities and things that they did to keep people engaged at day program just by Zoom. And they reported a lot of success with that. So I think it's been 5 or 6 weeks ago, we put into our Appendix K, we put the virtual day habilitation as a new service in there. And we have gotten, in fact, I think Erin Campbell, who works with Jen in Medicaid, got a lot of comments from families that we received. And I got some just really asking the state to move forward on the virtual day hab. So I do want folks to know that we are moving, we are doing all we can on our end to get ready for that. But CMS has had some questions for us in the Appendix K because it's a new service. And we've been responding to those questions, but we don't have CMS approval yet. So since it is something new, we have to wait until we get that formal approval before we can start that virtual day habilitation. So we will start it, and that will be one of the things that we will look at continuing even beyond the public health emergency. But again, just to be clear, we will have to do a regular waiver amendment to be able to get that as a service in our waiver. So I think those are my main updates, but I'm happy to take any questions about any of that information that I just shared.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. I can read. Looks like there were some questions for me on here, but go ahead, Steve.
Okay, so last week I was on that call, and if I remember correctly, they noted that there was a separate Appendix K made for those affected by Laura and Delta, and that you were waiting for approval from CMS. Is that still the case? Can you give us an update on that?
Jen,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I can do that one. Yes, we submitted a separate Appendix K for Hurricane Laura. We did not submit one for Hurricane Delta because our Appendix Ks for Hurricane Laura were already open, and the way that submissions to CMS work is once you have, so sorry to get really technical here, but the way those authorities work is if you have an Appendix K open for a certain disaster event, such as COVID, it's run on a separate track than your Appendix K submission for a different disaster, such as Laura. So I can submit those separately, and they will be reviewed separately. However, because the same requests that we would make for Hurricane Delta would be made under the Laura Appendix K, we did not need to submit a third Appendix K for Hurricane Delta. We were able to fall within the public health emergency period for Laura, and basically what we already submitted is under review, and that preempts us having to go back a third time and wait for additional approvals. So CMS is reviewing both our COVID Appendix Ks and our Laura Appendix Ks currently. The Laura Appendix Ks have not been approved yet either. There have been several questions back and forth just because Laura was so devastating that we did make some requests that were pretty big. Some things around respite and other services. So they just we're being very careful and having some additional scrutiny on those, but we've answered all of their questions as quickly as we received them, and I think, we're making a lot of progress. So I'm hoping that we'll get a definitive response on the Hurricane Laura one within the next couple weeks. But it would be retroactive to the date we, not the date we requested, to the beginning of the public health emergency for Laura. So, so that's good news. It would be retroactive back to that.
And then I have a question here. Why is the monitored in-home caregiving payment less than companion care payment when more care is involved? That's one I'll have to take back to my team. I have a team who does the rate development, and I'm just not sure of the answer to that. So I'll take that back. I think that's from Kathy. Make sure we get an answer back on that. And then from Miss Jill Eagle, asking what kind of work do I do? And I do apologize that I didn't start by introducing myself. So my name is Julie Foster Hagan, and I am the Assistant Secretary over the Office for Citizens with Developmental Disabilities in the Louisiana Department of Health. So basically, I'm the director over the development of all services across the state for persons with developmental disabilities.
I guess I didn't introduce myself either.
For a couple of years now.
So my name is, for the new, my name is Jen Katzman, and I'm the Medicaid Deputy Director over Waivers. So Julie and I work hand in hand because she develops all the services and policy under the waivers that are provided through Medicaid, and I manage those authorities in relationship with CMS. So we're partners in crime.
And then another question here in the chat: what happens after January 27th to those who are still high risk? For example, underlying health conditions, can't wear masks for duration of day programs, or socialize with anyone outside of their household as recommended by CDC. And so in response to that, that is why we are wanting to use this last quarter to really start having conversations and planning, so that, because that will be very individualized by person in terms of what needs to change. And we do anticipate that some of the plans of care and services that were in place before COVID will need to change now, after COVID. And that's why we want to make sure that folks are having those discussions and are having those discussions now, because the answer to that is going to be really different for everyone. And we need to come to a plan that works for everyone, or works for each individual person. And we are working closely with the support coordination agencies as well to identify if there are specific concerns. But there's not going to be, there won't, even though I want to make clear, even though the exemptions are going to go away either in January or at some point in the future, no one's saying that anyone has to go back to the day programs, if they don't feel safe to do so. It may be that we need to think of something else that they might do during the day. Whether that be the virtual day habilitation that we can get as a service, or whether that be something else that the person might want, to explore doing differently. And so, of course, if they're not going to day program, that may mean that we need to adjust the number of hours that they're receiving supports. And so we might need to look at that. So, like, as I said, again, that's why we're really reinforcing the need to have planning so that we're ready for when those exemptions go away, whether that be January or, again, we can't say at this point. CMS hasn't given us an idea that even if they do extend it, how long would they extend it? And we don't know that information either. So we just are trying to be as prepared as we can and to think through what all those considerations are for each person.
Hey, Mike, it looks like Jill Hano and Liz Gary have their hands up as well.
I want
Okay.
to talk. Liz, please go first because I'm trying to charge my laptop.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Julie. I have a quick question. The monitored in-home care, well, let me go back. The companionship care the companion care had come in existence prior to COVID. So that's not new per se in the sense, but it was fairly new. It just didn't happen since. But the monitored in-home care is, correct?
It is fairly new in the OCDD world. The monitored in-home caregiving has been in place in the OAAS home and community-based waivers for a while now.
Okay, so in order to do that, you didn't have to update the waiver. You just had to add it as a service. Is that correct?
No, we were in the midst of doing a waiver amendment update to add monitored in-home caregiving. About 2 years ago, we did a process. There were I don't remember the number. There were a couple hundred people who were in an OAAS waiver who had an OCDD statement of approval. And so in order to help those people get to the really most appropriate waiver for them, we shifted them from OAAS Community Choices waiver to the OCDD Residential Options waiver. And many of those people were receiving monitored in-home caregiving as a service. And so they weren't able to come over to our waiver because they felt strongly that they wanted to be able to continue that service and that was a service that worked for them. So we had already, prior to COVID, started the process of amending our waivers, our new opportunities waiver and residential options waiver to include monitored in-home caregiving. So it had started that process even before the Appendix K.
Okay, so my other question is are we still planning to move forward with amendments for a tiered waiver that was originally supposed to be for 2021? Where are we with that?
We are still planning on it, but we are significantly delayed in that process. So.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking, Julie, is I just want to give you a heads up that I still think we need to, I don't know that it can be done, but I think it's very important that we figure out some other options for family members to still be able to assist their, whether it's their children or whether it's their adults in their homes, because I don't think the monitored in-home care, the companion care is really going to benefit a lot of families in the sense that you're still very restrictive and that you can't have some breaks in between. And I think there's a lot of family members out there who could use a little bit of the income coming in because they can't get other jobs due to the fact of the severity or the needs of the individual with disabilities, as well as the fact that they still could make some money, but also have the opportunity to have somebody come in and give them a break. Because with my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but with the monitored in-home care, you're 24/7, so you don't get to have anybody else to come in. Maybe I'm wrong on that. And then the companion care is, I think, a 12-hour shift or something like that. And those things are pretty restrictive when it comes to people trying to be able to have a break.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to find out. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to check with my folks on that one as well.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay. Then there's another question here. Okay, Jill, let me read this real quick and then I'll come right back to you. Would choosing the monitored in-home caregiver option do away with skilled nursing care? No, with the monitored in-home caregiving, there is a component. There is a nurse involved who does do some level of oversight, but that doesn't mean that that would replace if there is also the need and the medical necessity for skilled nursing as well. That's still a separate service. Okay, Jill? Payno?
This goes way back. On one that you and Jen had both said two laws that are in special section. Did she mention, I think I wrote down the wrong number, HCR 29 is the, okay, in HB 39.
Yes, Jill,
It's
those are,
HCR 21.
no,
No?
Oh,
What?
HCR 29 is the one about the ICFs, and HCR 21 is a separate piece of legislation that I didn't know about, but I'm glad Julie brought it up.
I thought you did. Sorry.
No, it's so Jill, I'm glad she did bring it up because I forgot about it. HCR 21 is a resolution that matches HB 39. So they're companion pieces of legislation. I don't know why I'm looking at my phone and not at you. HCR 21 is a resolution that says the legislature resolves to fund home and community-based providers in the way that HB 39, which is the Supplemental Appropriations Act, actually carries out. So they're what we call companion legislation. So Julie is right. There's HCR 29, which is the ICF issue on leave of absence I discussed. And then there's HCR 21 and HB 39, which are about appropriating money to home and community-based providers due to COVID. That help?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay. I'm glad you said that, Julie. I forgot about 21. Okay.
Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised.
There you go.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone, for letting me speak. And thank you, Julie and Jennifer, for all the answers. Julie, I have another question for you.
Okay.
I want to kind of echo what Liz says. I feel the MIC is also too rigid, and the reason I asked about the pay was because I understand, like for assist level 2, the pay might be somewhere between $30 to $35 a day, as opposed to companion, I believe, is around $70 a day. And those in the MIC would have more severe disabilities, less independent, and require more care. When I questioned it, I'm told that the cost may have to do with MIC requiring monthly visits by a nurse. What if an individual doesn't require a monthly visit by a nurse, that they don't necessarily have any specific health conditions that require so frequent monitoring? I think you can save costs there if you were more flexible with that, depending on the individual's needs. And I think there are families out there also that who are high risk, can't necessarily, or not sure if like going to Dayhab or back to the regular services with a regular DSW is safe yet, but they might want to slowly transition into the community, keeping their risk low, where they might want to go to Dayhab or out in the community just once or twice a week, so their exposure is still less, and then gradually transition as it gets safer and safer. That's when some of the MIC could still come in handy for families, and particularly those who are older, can't work, have to still care for their child, but still have limited physical abilities themselves in caring for their adult child in particular. So I think those are some of the things that OCDD needs to consider with either MIC or coming up with another program that would start paying the family as caregivers. Thank you.
Okay.
Mike, I don't see that we have any more hands up or any more comments. I think you're muted, Mike.
There we go. Sorry about that. Julie, thank you, and Jennifer, both for providing us with that information today. Before we adjourn, I'd like to ask everybody, be thinking about ideas and activities you may want the council to consider for the fiscal year 22 action plan. This will be the plan that'll start next October 2021. We can discuss your ideas at the next meeting in January, where we'll all have the opportunity to make recommendations for the council to consider sending to the planning committee. Lillian, you might want to keep this in mind as well. Does anybody have anything else before we adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have a second? Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear who that was. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Patty. Is there any discussion? Any public comment?
Jill has her hand raised. Jill Eagley.
Go ahead, Jill. You're muted, Jill.
Because for the executive committee, who do I tell about what committee I want to serve on? Who is that? Who motions that for the 1 to 3?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
For the executive committee starting at 1 o'clock, who do I tell what committee that I want to serve on?
I'm not following your question.
So for the executive committee, the next one at 1 o'clock today, who do I tell on what committee I want to serve on?
I believe that would be Randall Brown. He's
Randall Stephen? Okay.
Yes.
He's the
board
chairman.
chair.
He's the
Yes.
board chair. Okay, thank y'all. Okay.
Council chair, I'm sorry.
Council chair, okay.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Do we have any objections to adjourning? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank y'all.
All right, thanks, everyone.